Okay. Welcome back. Today we have an agenda until 2:30. We're going to go ahead and start with you. Proposing Article 15 and 16. We'll go turn it's 14 and 23. We'll take a break. We'll get a financial update. We'll have lunch and any article presentations that will come back. And then we'll talk about next steps for the next one. Thank you. All right, don't take one if you already have. Take double.
I've been told.
There's not enough.
I do.
Shout out to Hannah for printing and also hand hole punching these.
Oh. The new copier machine is not quite.
Yeah.
100%.
Thanks, Hannah.
No,
you.
and I bought a piece of.
Yeah.
In the book.
Yeah. It is a long one. Does that get all the way around to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So on page 1 of this article, I think we are fully in agreement on everything. So I'm going to skip to leave. For personal leave, in your last proposal, you had suggested an additional day of personal leave, so 2 days per year, and we've accepted that proposal. This should be italicized, sorry. So 2 days, we've accepted that. And we changed approved to provided for each employee. And then we've added some language here, which based on our conversation during the last bargaining session, that employees shall also be permitted to convert 1 day of unused sick leave into an additional personal leave day. And that's in line with what our licensed colleagues have had. And then there's just a shift of some of the language that was in this original paragraph from the original contract language down into 1. When circumstances permit, leave will be requested at least 2 working days in advance and approved 1 workday in advance. We struck this language about personal leave requests must be pre-approved by human resources. When we dug into the current process for personal leave requests, it sounds like these are being approved by immediate supervisors and not all the way to HR. So that's the reason for the strike through there. And then we've left this part about denials will be submitted in writing. And then down in 3, this should have been italicized as well. This is also, we are accepting your proposal for employees shall be allowed to carry forward 1 of their unused personal leave days to the subsequent school year, but in no instance shall be allowed to accumulate more than a total of 3 days of personal leave in any given year. Questions on that?
I guess my question back up into 1. The language that you have struck, is it, and this will just help in our conversation as a team, is it the notion of pre-approval that you are not agreeing with, or that it happens by human resources?
That it happens by human resources. So it's the current process that what we have found is that they're submitted in front of our absence management system, and the immediate supervisors are the ones that approve or deny it.
Good. Good.
So possibly this was the process. I think there was a paper form during our, I don't know if it was our last contract or whenever this language went into effect, there was a paper form that was submitted. But now because it all happens in our absence management system, it's a different process.
But I could add that saying it's approved would leave it open to HR approving it in the absence of the supervisor. It doesn't, the noun isn't delineated there. So.
Thank you.
And okay, so going into bereavement leave. We have added in bereavement leave with full pay shall be allowed up to 5 days for each death of a family member within 1 calendar year. And I'd like to allow some time for a couple of members of our team to talk about the addition of the 1 calendar year. Starting with Amanda, if you wanted to go first with that?
Sure. We were just talking about how if the 5 days are permitted, if it's within quick succession, then that shows that the district is willing to grant that if it happens quickly after a grief. But we discussed as a team that sometimes it's that first birthday after a death that you really don't want to come to work, and that might not be something that's gonna happen in that 90-day period. And I think the reason we shifted to calendar year was because if the death occurs June instead of school year, if it happened in June and the services were beyond 90 days, or however many days we settle upon, in the following year, that's when the family is going to gather for that celebration of life or service. We wouldn't want it to be like, oh, sorry, that death happened in June or sometime at the end of the last school year for those that are 10 months, and to not have those 90 days, so we just wanted to delineate that it was calendar days versus tied to the school year, however we land it. And then I don't know if I missed something at the table.
Yeah, David, did you want to speak?
Sure. Also, our sense is that, especially through the pandemic, we believe that prior to the pandemic, the 90 days was written, and many cultures here in the United States, not all, but many cultures would want to have the memorial or celebration of life within a week or very quickly. However, in the pandemic, it seems to us that many cultures have learned the value of maybe waiting 3 months, 6 months, a year out, and that there can be more opportunity for family to get together and to memorialize or celebrate that life. And so now our sense is that far more frequently families feel free to put off the celebration of life or memorial service, the observance of the death of the loved one, much, much later than 90 days. So we think there's been a cultural shift that we would like to observe.
Just a quick question on that one. And I guess this is for our team as well. Are you aware of any situations where people have had those scenarios come up and they've requested under that last sentence or that parenthetical, except in extenuating circumstances on a case-by-case basis, and they've been denied? So if I've come to HR and said, hey, my family, we're going to do this remembrance, but it's going to be, 6 months from now instead of within 90 days, and HR has said no, because I think that's one of the reasons we stuck with the current language, was the idea that it did allow for those sorts of like it says case by case situations where things like that happen. So just am curious as to whether anecdotally you guys have heard that that's been an issue for folks.
Not in that specific case that you're mentioning, if a memorial service is planned more than 90 days after the death. I think the other thing that we spoke about extensively as a team was like anniversaries, birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Those, grief is obviously not a linear experience. And that was the thing that we had talked about as when you encounter those days, you don't want to have to come and ask for, oh, I need a bereavement day. And I have to prove it to somebody many, many days after the fact.
Sure.
You want to be able to just take it. And so I think that was more the conversation that we had as a team, is being able to use those within a year of the death and not being able to, not having to prove it to HR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would add, I don't know that our membership would think, well, gee, if the birthday of my child who died occurs 9 months later, do I have to demonstrate that that's an extenuating circumstance?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it an extenuating circumstance? And this would remove that concern,
Mm-hmm.
but that it might not rise to the level extenuating circumstance.
Yeah, and I do know some have just not asked because they didn't want to have to rehash their grief or talk about it extensively again. So they just chose to forfeit their remaining days because of this past date, which just made me really sad. I mean, didn't even feel like they could approach the district about that.
Mhm.
Take time to agree to their love.
Thank you. Thanks, that was a question I have on that piece.
Okay, moving on to emergency leave, in F1, we've added the word occurrence. We had some confusion, I think, in the conversation that we had, during our last bargaining session about, like, are we granted 3 days of emergency leave total per year or 3 per occurrence of a catastrophe? And so we added occurrence because if you have a flood in your house and then also a fire the same year, I would imagine that you would have emergency leave for both those circumstances. God forbid that happens to you. So that's why that language has been added there. We also added immediate before supervisor. And then turning the page down to F7, we've added F7 back. We presented this article before presenting Article 19, and as you now are aware, F7 is tied to our language proposals in Article 19, and those two really need to be considered together. So we'd like to have a discussion of those two together. Down in, are there any questions on this part before I move on?
I don't have any.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over 6, I believe. We had a conversation during our last bargaining session about the language in 6. And so we have added some more inclusive language in 6. The previous language was in case of a child born to a wife or dependent child living in the employee's home. And our change here is in case of a child born to a spouse, partner, or dependent. Emergency leave will be granted. We did have some conversation about a dependent, whether the dependent lives in the person's home or not. And families take many different forms. And if a person is your dependent, whether or not they live in your home, you would want to be present for the birth of the child. And they are your legal dependent. So we felt that that language maybe covered better the idea that we were trying to capture and is also more inclusive. So questions on that?
No, I don't have any questions. To me, it's an odd one to go into emergency leave because the case of a child born to a spouse or partner, the likelihood that that's covered by the Oregon, so it's just odd that it's been in here. It's not a change that you guys are proposing. It's just, to me, it's a little bit odd that it's housed under emergency leave when it's so covered by other forms of leave. So, again, that's not really a question, just observation.
Down to G1A and B, going back to our conversation during our last bargaining session, it seems that this language was maybe written to capture the needs of our licensed staff and put into the classified contract rather than crafted with classified staff in mind. And so our proposal here is really meant to, it's really written more with classified staff. So we really do feel that classified staff who completed their initial hire period, that really captures more what we're trying to get at here with parental leave, with the request for additional parental leave. And then as far as the request for a specific period of time and whether or not that time, the return coincides with a natural break or recess period, that is not as much I mean, it's not as salient for a classified staff member as it would be for a licensed staff member.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was kind of the conversation that we had at the bargaining table last time. So we've added that back in. And I believe we are in agreement. And Jay, we have a proposal. We heard some of your thoughts when we bargained last, and we tried to kind of do a compromise here between our two sides, let me just read it and then I'll talk about it. Okay, so requests for short-term leave without pay less than 5 days will be processed through the employee absence reporting system and reviewed by the immediate supervisor and human resources director for a final decision. The leave request will be considered based on the purpose of the leave, the impact on continuity of instruction and services, and employee leave history. All requests must include the specific reason for the leave and must be submitted in the absence reporting system at least 1 week prior to the date of the requested leave. If denied, the reason for denial shall be provided to the employee in writing. So I think one thing that we heard last week was that the regularly scheduled break during the school year was not an important piece for your team. So we removed that. The criteria developed by the district, this language here, and that what it may include, this is very vague and leaves a lot of room for other things. And obviously that's a concern to us. We want the criteria to be clear to employees. So what we heard was important was the impact on continuity of instruction and services and the employee leave history. So we've left that in. Again, we took the part out about having it received in human resources only because that is not the process as we understand it, that it needs to be submitted to the absence reporting system. It seems to be a shared interest that the reason for denial would be provided in writing. And then we removed this part about vacation days must be used prior to requesting leave without pay. And the reason that we removed that is one of the concerns primarily for our custodial staff is that they often, when they work during inclement weather days, they often have to surrender their vacation days with, their vacation days are surrendered against their work. And so they would rather lose leave without pay for those days than forfeit their vacation. And so we removed this part to protect that from happening to them. So that's the main reason for that.
A question on that last piece.
Yeah.
Is that like a scenario where they're not able to make it to work and so they either have to use some form of leave? And you're saying they perhaps would rather use unpaid?
Yes. And they would like to have the option to do that rather than having their vacation taken.
Yep.
Under L, I believe we're in agreement. Sorry, I'm just trying to look to make sure that none of the same. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Thank you. And in M. Okay, so in M2, we have a proposal here. Number between 1 and 99. So our proposal here is up to 5 sick leave days. And then coming to this number, I did want to point out that in M6, we do have the cap here still of the maximum number of hours that can be donated by the bargaining unit in a given year, and that's 800 hours. So we have in proposing this increase to the number of sick leave days, left all the other protections under the guidelines for leave donations. It's just the individual number of sick leave days that can be donated that we've increased. So again, everything else remains as it is in this section of the contract. It's just that individuals can donate more from their sick leave towards the total.
More in a singular instance or across multiple instances? Because I thought I remember in our conversation last time, people were saying, sometimes we have a donation and then another person, another bargain, member falls ill or something. I wish I could donate to them, but I can't because, and so the 5 days, is it that I could donate to multiple different people across the year or 5 days or both? I mean, maybe it's both.
I would think it would be both, but that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, is there an interest that you have that might, would you hear about on that? Yeah, because I don't know that we discussed the difference there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have to think about whether top of my head, I don't know that there's really an interest in one particular direction or the other. I was just trying to tie it back to what you guys were expressing last time, which was the idea that I donate a leave day and then later in the year, somebody else has an incident and I wish I could have donated a day to them. So I was trying to connect those dots back. That was really all. Excuse me.
I could also, I believe Tiffany mentioned that if a day is donated now and then not needed, then it's returned to you, but it's already like the box is checked that you've donated 1 day, and then you can't even donate the 1 day as the system stands. But if we expanded it a little, even if that wasn't returned to you, you could still have to leave it. And it would be ideal to be able to donate it and then they don't, then it's not needed as a donation. And then that freedom to give it at a later point would still be in place.
Thank you.
I have a question on that one. When someone is receiving those donated hours, would they then, under this proposal, have the opportunity to convert that time to personal leave?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that we considered that.
I don't think it works that way. I think when you have a sick leave donation, it's for a specific illness or injury or need of the person receiving it. So the person is moving into unpaid status where they receive a donation. Correct. I think that
They've run out of sick leave and they're in a gap. So this would bridge the gap. So we have folks in the past who have needed up to 30 days that they are in an unpaid status. Sometimes it's 5. So it just depends on the circumstance. If they either went into short-term or long-term or return to work. So any amount of days that are donated go and are used to fill that gap.
Thank you. I wasn't sure how the process was. Another concern I have, and I think I brought this up last time too, is for folks who are tier 1 and tier 2, like that sick leave balance does contribute towards their first benefit as they move into retirement. And so there's no note here to differentiate that, but just making sure that folks are aware. I'm a longer term employee. I've been here since 2002, and I may have a good sick leave balance to give, but maybe not be aware of the personal implications for them.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
As far as how the thing operates, so number 2 says donate up as written 1 sick leave day, or you propose donating up to 5 sick leave days at their current contract hourly level. So does that mean if I'm an 8-hour employee, I donate 8 hours? It's then used in hourly increments. So then if I'm a 5-hour employee who's taking the donation, I only take 5 of those hours to make up 1 of my days.
Yeah, or if you're a 4-hour employee and I give you 1 of my days, it counts for 2
days for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
And
It's interesting. The language switches back and forth between days and hours, within this section, but it sounds like it makes sense, Laura.
Yes, because we give a full day and it's used in hourly.
Right.
It's a little confusing, but it works out.
Right.
I don't know hypothetically, like if I donated a day, which would be 8 hours to a 5-hour employee, and they didn't need that other 3 hours, I don't know if the system would allow, if the system would kick back those 3 hours back into my, currently, it would revert back in, but I don't, is that how it works? Does
Yeah.
anybody know? Okay.
It does.
The language seems to say
Hypothetically, we
that
donate the 3 hours.
the
In
event
the
hours are returned to employees.
Or donated it back to.
And I think that's how you end up being ineligible to donate again, even if only 4 hours is used, then you get 4 back. And then now you can't donate again because you already donated the same.
Yeah, and the current language seems to say you can, so I'm not saying that the system has disallowed that. The language says in the event the hours are returned to an employee, that employee is eligible to donate those hours to other recipients. So the language seems to imply that you could, and so if the system is not allowing that, yeah.
Can I ask a question just from kind of understanding? Does the hours that I will donate to go to one particular person, it's not like you said before, it's not a bank. So we know exactly which hours go to which individual or no?
So it's, usually it's anonymous who you're donating to. Unless the employee knows and chooses to share with their colleagues, like, oh, this is my sick leave donation. So the union puts it out as we have an employee in need of the donation. If you would like to give, you can give. There's no information shared about what the request is or for how much. It's just enough, like, send this number to the benefits office or payroll and you can donate. So no personally identifying information is shared with anyone. If the employee who's made the request chooses to share with their colleagues, hey, this is my request, and here's why I need it, then they can. But people don't know who their hours are going to. The only people who know that information is the.
The reason why I'm asking is because of that 3 hour going back, it's like, how is that tracked? Who tracks that?
So you would find out, because payroll would contact and say, X portion of your hours has been applied to this donation request, and then X portion has been returned to your city.
So if you ask one person up, 30 hours. You have we have a basic staff, so if we get from you 100 hours. It's a first come, first serve kind of a thing. The first 30 hours get applied to request A, and then the rest of them are sent back. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? So the last changes for this article are in O. And I here, we had a conversation last time about specific language concerning public health emergencies and quarantine and isolation and how the words may change, but the needs probably won't change. And so we don't want to tie ourselves to specific words. And so our proposal here took out the language of quarantine and isolation, and I'm going to read it out loud. When the district or appropriate public health official directs an individual employee to be absent from work to prevent the spread of communicable disease, that employee shall, and then the rest of the language here, we're already in agreement. So that is the conclusion of our changes to Article 15. Any questions on it?
Did you from the district side have any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, Article 16, does everybody have this? Yes. Okay. We just have one change to the article. Last time we bargained, it came up that there was some changes to the reclassification committee away from the table. And so our proposal here is just kind of restructure our proposal in alignment with that. It sounds like now there's only 2 steps to the reclassification. So here we have, in the event of a tie at the final step of the reclass, applicants shall be offered the opportunity to meet with the committee in person to advocate for their reclassification request. And following this meeting, the committee shall conduct. And if anybody on the team wanted to speak to that.
You have any questions, Martha?
Sorry, I do want to share. Sometimes, some of us, including myself, are better sometimes at sharing and speaking out and answering any questions versus in writing. So it gives the individual employee the opportunity to answer any questions and be able to kind of navigate for themselves before that decision is made.
But it scoots it well beyond that original, like you have to meet these bullet points before we're even gonna start the process. So give them that chance. This is why I felt it was tough.
All right, staff, looks like we're up. So you have Articles 14 and 23 for you. All right, everybody have, oh, not quite yet. All right, looks like it's made its way around. So I'll start walking you through this one. Section A, we've gone back and forth with some proposals. kind of remaking the chart, for lack of a better word, how people accrue vacation. I think we're trying to find kind of a compromise point between what is currently a system where, you know, each year you move up incrementally, and with no advancement throughout the first 5 years. We agree with you that 5 years seems like quite a while until you move into the next category of vacation days. So we have adopted a 0 to 3. And left that at the 10 days. And I think you guys, that matches up with yours. Although yours might have been 0 through 2 technically, because less than 3 years to me would be 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah, we should have a conversation about that, because I think that in our proposal, we're saying less than 3 years and then 3 to 5 years. So
Yeah,
you would, if you were 1 day short of completing 3 years, you would be in the less than 3 years range. As soon as you've completed 3 years, you'd be in the second bracket. In your grid, I'm seeing 0 to 3 years and then 4 to 6 years. So does this mean essentially 0 years to 3 years and almost 4 years in the first bracket? And what happens between having completed 3 years and not yet having completed 4?
I think I'm not understanding the question well, because in my mind, maybe I'm oversimplifying it. Like I'm either in my 3rd year of employment here, in which case I would get 10 days of vacation, or I'm in my 4th year of employment here, in which case I get 13 days of vacation.
I see. Okay, understanding your intention there, I think is the important thing.
Okay.
We can talk about how to.
Because I think it front loads. I think you get it like at the beginning.
Yeah,
So the beginning of your 3rd year under our proposal, you'd get 10 days of vacation. Then at the beginning of your 4th year, you would get 13 days of vacation. I believe that's how it operates. And since yes, so I believe. For us, yours, you know, again, I think we're trying to find a compromise point here between what is currently there and what you propose. Just to be honest, yours just accelerated too quickly for us. You know, under yours, you know, people in their 5th year of employment would be getting double the amount of vacation they currently get. They would advance to 20 days, and right now 0 through 5 years is 10 days. So it just felt like, honestly, just a faster acceleration than I think we were prepared to make as a change. So we have proposed to accelerate it under what we believe, and if you find examples where you think this isn't true, people are either held harmless or have better than the current. That is, we don't think anybody steps backwards by this model. The majority of people move forward in their vacation accrual schedule. So, you know, I mean, you can take individual points throughout here. You know, right now, somebody with 6 years gets 11 days. Under our proposal, they get 13 days. So
looks like the only group not gaining is if you're at 10 years.
You're at 10 years.
14.
I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess for us, it's purely a numbers issue of, you know, how much do we advance the vacation accrual rate in kind of one fell swoop. So this is our take on it. Any questions on that or our thinking behind that before I move on from it?
Would you be open to a friendly amendment to clarify that it's when you were entering those years, like the 4th, but as soon as you're entering your 4th year of employment, it's not completing your 4th year of employment?
Yeah, I think if we match what practice, Carrie, you had kind of a confused look on your face, or like, is it really?
I'm gonna look at my eye vision. I don't know if that's been my experience, but I'll go back and look.
So, I mean, if we need to resolve that point, I think then we can, you know, that's the way we understood it to work, and that was the way that we intended it to work.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, just for clarity, because I think I'm understanding exactly your proposal, but I want to make sure. So 0 to 3 years means you're in your 0 year, your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd year. As soon as you're in your 4th year of employment, you're in the 2nd bracket.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not completed years. It's You're in your fourth year.
In your fourth year,
Completed fourth year.
you
Okay.
get 13 days of vacation.
Understood.
So maybe a helpful clarification is there is no 0 year in this scenario, because you're in your first year the moment you're hired. So it would be 1 to 3 years. not
That's
0
true.
to 3.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, thanks for that. I believe the language now in B, we're in agreement. C, there was no changes in the first paragraph, second paragraph, we're in agreement. Section D, we are in agreement. Section E, we're in agreement. Yeah, vacation requests, that was your language, shall be submitted through the employee absence system and reviewed for approval. You just said submitted through the employee absence system and reviewed by the immediate supervisor. We do think it's reviewed for approval. That's what the immediate supervisor is doing. So we've left for approval in there. We agree that otherwise that's how it operates. They're submitted through the employee absence system. This is going to be looked at by the immediate supervisor. We have a slightly different verbiage here. You had the district shall not impose dates that prohibit vacation requests. And we've instead framed it as the district shall not impose dates that employees are prohibited from submitting vacation requests. I guess what we didn't want to do is encroach or imply that a supervisor was without authority on any given date to deny a vacation request. What we are in agreement on is we're not going to publish dates where you can't even ask. Don't even bother asking, because we think there might be situations where those could still be approved. So that's our intent there. That long strikeout is the same in our two proposals, so is the last strikeout. Section G, I believe we adopted your language. We agree that that made it more clear than this current, 1, 2, 3, 7. So thank you for that. H. Hannah, can you remind me why we kept eligible in there?
Because it's section.
Section D. Okay. You're eligible if you're beyond your 3 months of it. Thanks. And then the change from direct to immediate supervisors. It could be employees eligible per section D above. But that's the only thing that we found that made you eligible or not eligible. The section D.
That makes sense. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Article 23. Matt, are you plugging up the one flagship?
Back up. I don't know that they have. It means I'm notifying. totally understand, I would.
Does everybody have this one now? All right. I think we're pretty close on this one. And the other ones too, but this one in particular, section A. Yes, just for the sake of less change, we think it means the same thing, just crossing off non-probationary. No employee should be disciplined without just cause and due processes defined in Article 2 definition. You had rewritten it as a new first sentence, and I guess it was just I think it's better this way, but I don't think it's a big deal.
Touche. All right. We'll review it.
All right. Number 4, we should have made plural programs of assistance. Missed that, sorry. Programs of assistance for improvement. So I think that matches with yours. Down in B, you just had some formatting stuff, which was fine. C, for immediate supervisor, we added. And then also later on, or immediate supervisor. Down at the very bottom, I think for us, we just didn't really want to keep track of union business cards, et cetera. I think we're hoping that we would cover it by saying, here's a link to the union website and here's the union office phone number. That doesn't, that was a piece of what you had. So I think it was mostly the keeping track of the business card. Honestly, we didn't.
As long as we don't have supervisors who are just verbally giving the phone number, which no one can remember. I used to remember a lot of phone numbers.
Yeah.
Now I can't remember my own.
Yeah. I think were you guys having a gap in that one? Were you experiencing situations where people were having a hard time getting a hold of you guys or knowing who to get a hold of?
Well, what I'll say is we've recently changed our website over into a different format and
Yeah.
it gives you this very long. It's not a clickable link on a due process notice, right? So it was hard.
Can you explain that to me a little bit more?
Kara? She's our tech person.
No, but like, so first, people got notice of a
Yeah.
meeting or something like
Yeah.
that. And it was, then they got here's how you
We're trying to
contact.
get a hold of the union and it was our website.
Okay,
And that website formatted into a Google site
Yeah.
and it became this very long and just not as clear.
If the link is in a PDF that you're emailed, you can click on it, but if it's handed to you physically, you don't have a way of doing that, so we need the additional phone number resource.
well, that's what I would envision now. Here's a
Yeah.
link and the phone number, union office phone number is.
Yeah, but a lot of times those due processes, it's not necessarily a letter, it's a piece of paper. So,
But we would have the number there, right?
yeah, the phone
Right.
number is gonna be very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Like they don't have to manually type HC.
No,
All
it
that
became this very
stuff.
long thing, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it'd be okay because I don't think anyone's ever getting a verbal notice of one of these meetings and that's it. Right?
that seems, I mean, yeah, as long as no one's getting just a verbal notice, I think we're in a good place. The intent of our proposal was that they get the phone number, well, and email address in our proposal, that they just get that in writing, and it could be our business card or whatever printed copy that you hand someone is fine. Yeah,
And Martha can correct me, but I think we would just revise our template that supervisors use to include the union telephone number in addition to the link. So,
yeah.
those are the only differences in that article.
Question before?
Yeah.
Was there a specific reason you included the phone number, not the email address?
Not great.
No, not
Well,
necessarily.
when we talked about it, it was just because the email address and the business card seemed like information that might change a little more frequently than like a web or phone number. So we just didn't wanna be on the hook for providing out of date info for some reason, like their contact email.
We do actually have one email that is designated to help, yeah.
So it's not like Bethany's email, it's.
No, it's just help@HCU 467.org.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful information.
Definitely more open. I still wanna be less, oh, this is
Right,
dated and you have to go change one more thing.
Yeah.
yeah, as officers too,
And then you go back.
yeah, no, we want them to have, up-to-date info as well, so.
Yeah, I don't know that then there's an objection to the email address if it's a general email.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think the only other thing was in A4, you do need the definitions article to now say improvement to business. That was the conversation that was kind of happening last time, was
Oh, yeah.
which way do we go? So we went this way, and then I think you guys have definitions in your course, so whoever works on that.
thanks, Tim.
Yes, added to the list.
It's in the draft, so that you can put that back.
Yeah, always.
The word improvement is in there.
We,
All right.
Good, good, good.
So that's 23.
Thank you.
Yep,
We're ahead of schedule.
we are ahead of schedule. What would you like to do? Would you like to take a break? Would you like to go with the financial update presentation and then take a break?
We can do it right first.
Okay,
Let's do a quick break. You want to come back here at 10:25?
sure. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, looks like, we're on to our next item, and I am intrigued. It says financial update presentation from Michelle from 10:45 to noon. This is gonna be some presentation if it lasts an hour and 15 minutes long.
Yeah, sorry, guys, I don't think I can milk it that long, but you may have some questions. We have lots of questions, so, I'll do my best to answer those. Are you ready to get started? Yes. Yeah, are you guys ready?
Yes.
Okay, it should look very familiar because I try to use the same format as we talk about both budget and then also our proposals back and forth. So it should look pretty familiar to you guys. We can go ahead and get started. So here's the agenda for today. Again, having links to some information that I've already shared, kind of like read that back for you guys, make it easy and accessible. We'll be sharing these slides when after we're done today. About July, we started to realize that the district was going to have a budget gap for this year. We didn't recognize like the amount. We had to wait and disclose an amount until we knew what our enrollment was going to be for the 25 year. And then we shared that information with the school board on October 8th. And shared it with the union, the HEA as well, and that immediately after that. And then wanted to just be sure that we bring it here to you guys as well. There is a link to the board video, so you can see if you're interested in any conversation that the community had and wonders they had. It's always a pretty rigorous when I'm bringing budget information forward, especially when it's not positive. So we'll be linking you to the last update we brought to you guys. Getting a little bit more into the details for both 23-24 and the current year. And then kind of a outlook, based on additional information that we've received. And then towards the end, I'm gonna kind of price out our proposal, our original offer, and then your guys' counter, so you can see, the distance between. So, and then just leave that there, so that we all have this for reference moving forward. Okay, so last year, we received a very significant negative state school fund adjustment in May for the prior year enrollment decline. So that wasn't something that we anticipated. There were other factors in that adjustment for local revenue and everything else that goes into the state school fund distribution formula. But again, a negative adjustment in May for the prior year, 22-23. And then we had to adjust our assumptions for 23-24 based on our actual information that we received for 23-24 versus the projections that we had initially made. That would include our expenditures that were over budget in the following areas. So regular salaries, extended contract, other pay, and then of course, all of the associated payroll costs that go along with all of those wages were also over budget. Our substitute costs were over budget, and out of district tuition for students that sometimes need a more therapeutic environment than we can offer in our schools. So we noticed a pretty significant increase there. Probably the substitutes were the biggest one. And so this slide should look familiar to everyone who's been to my presentations before. This is some context for our budget. Again, this information was already shared with the community. Typical funding in the state is a little bit tricky as we reconcile a period of a 3-year period as we're moving through our school year. This May, we're likely to receive another adjustment for 23-24, but we also have to adjust our current assumptions for both revenue and expenditures based on the most actual recent information that we've had as we closed out last year. Expiration of federal support. So everyone is probably feeling that a little bit. We've received significant federal support since the pandemic, and we've been able to do a lot of supplemental services for staff and students during that period, but those have expired. We have our enrollment decline impact,
In Hillsborough, we target a 4% fund balance, which is much lower than many districts around us carry. And that's really good in a sense that we spend the money we get in the year we get for the services that we do in that year. But it really takes away our ability to build a contingency or be flexible in the terms of having to make some mid-year reduction. Our budget is 82, it's anywhere from 82 to 84% of payroll and benefits on any given year, which means anything that we need to do to bridge a budget gap is typically going to be some type of staffing impact. Last time I shared this, our 24-25 budget was in balance. It's not at this point, and so we're going to get some more details about that. Any items that we negotiate, we've got a lot that we've been talking about in excess of our budget assumptions are going to make that gap even a little bit bigger and the impact to our systems a little bit bigger. So I just want to bring that forward for everyone. All right, so this is the number that we were kind of waiting to see after our October 1st enrollment came in. For 24-25, we have a budget gap of just over $9.5 million. In comparison to our budget, that's 3.23%, which doesn't sound like a lot if you're thinking about it in terms of your own personal budget, maybe. But for us in Hillsborough, our fund balance target is 4%, so we're way getting really close to that. All right, so these are the budget gap mitigation strategies that we've shared with the community. We've shared with the licensed group as well. And just want to make sure that you guys have a chance to see it and ask any questions about it. We'll just go through them really quickly. Reduce building-based substitutes. So this was an early decision that we made, knowing that we had some type of a gap. Last year, we had 2 licensed and 2 classified building-based subs in every school, and we reduced that by half. That created a situation where we had extra adults in the building, even though there maybe weren't vacancies. So it's a level of staffing that we didn't have prior to the pandemic. We felt like that it would be appropriate to get back down to at least 1 of each. Our staffing, we had some additional fix-it FTE, and these are licensed FTE that's used when like class sizes are bubbling up in certain areas. We hold a little bit back so that we can add that once the year gets started. It was originally 9 FTE. We reduced that to 5.4, which is to date how much has been used. So just kind of stopping that. We had some money for summer programming that we didn't end up needing to use because we qualified and received this Oregon State summer program grant this year. Not everybody got it. We were super lucky and able to do a lot of good things for kids this summer. For our buildings and departments, we usually allow a level of carryover in their discretionary spending. So this is non-staff spending that if they come to the end of the year and they have a balance up to a certain amount in a normal year, we would carry that forward. By not allowing that carryover, we have an additional savings of $550,000. Our department budgets are also being reduced by 5% across the board. So that would be facilities, transportation, office and school performance, everybody in this building. That supports schools, they're shaving their budgets off as much, and we're hoping to yield $1 million there. By repurposing some of our after-school program dollars this year, it'll limit what we can do next year. But we can repurpose $500,000 of our student investment account funds with services which will help bridge the gap. Holding on all non-student contact hires. So really taking an internal review on if someone leaves, whether or not their position will be filled. Again, that's non-student facing. So primarily departments are going to feel that impact, but schools will likely feel that in some level of service. So just making that clear, but our students don't as much. Delay in our bus purchases. We've had two things happen. One, the state has kind of pushed back our deadline to have all of our first polluter buses replaced. And during the pandemic, we kind of got a little bit ahead in our replacement cycle. So Carol shared that with me, that this would be an appropriate year to maybe not purchase buses and just have them again in 25, 26. Saves a significant amount. And then the last one is reconfiguring our bargaining proposal. So we shared with HEA a proposal that was non-regressive and that the 3-year package was this more. It was a little bit more than what our last proposal had been, but it looks very different in terms of impact to save money in the first year and have a higher value in the second and third year of the proposal. So that's ideally, that's what that means, is if we can shift some of that cost to our system until a later time so that we can address it. And we have a contingency here. The total of these things is over our target, but not, it's an estimate for each one of those things. I can't guarantee that each one is going to yield what I'm hoping for you. All right. And this slide is just a reminder slide on the district's approach to the offer. Again, transparency and financial information. I think that's really, really important to all of us here because we want to see the most for recruitment, retention, and for services for students. We want to see as much resources in our system as we can get. 3-year bargain. Again, that's been historical for us to kind of bring stability to membership and also in our planning and our advocacy efforts in Salem. When we're looking for a funding amount to ask our legislatures, we know what it's going to be. And then sustainability for the CBA period, I highlighted that because at this point, based on what we know today, our sustainability is getting questionable. Like I can share with you what I think we need to do to balance the budget this year, but without knowing our funding level in year 2 and 3, I'm not sure that I can still say with confidence that it's a sustainable for the full period. We want to be targeted to market demand. We've worked hard as partners in the past to make sure that we are trying to get the wages where they need to be to attract and keep people. Of course, student-centered, I think we all have that interest. Timely with clear implementation details. So I'll finish this up with the next step slides that kind of maps out like our next bargains and kind of critical decision points in order to be implemented. All right, this is additional news that we've received. So on October 4th, PERS board released their new rates for 25-27. And again, for us, that's the year 2 and 3 of the biennium. And those rates are different for every single district in Oregon. For us in Hillsborough, we're increasing an average of 6.5 percentage points. So that, you know, I have a slide that kind of values that in a second, but that's the largest increase that I've seen in PERS from biennium to biennium. Usually in the past, they've collared it at 3% so that public municipalities aren't going to feel the impact of the unfunded liability as much. But that's what we see. So for us, each percentage point is about $1.6 million to the general fund, comes to about 21, closer to 22 actually for the biennium. And on the comparison slides that I'm going to share with you, I have that value added so that you can see that. I think one of the hardest things around the PERS changes is that people aren't going to feel that right away. Like that money is flowing to the system to pay for our pension benefit that we've all been promised already. Like it's not getting bigger. It's just going to maintain that value for us in the future. Okay, so you guys have seen this slide before as well. I just added a 25-27 column that shows the difference in the PERS rate as a percentage of salary growth. So it's going up from 23.1 to almost 30%. Almost 30 cents for every dollar will go to PERS and or the PERS bond debt service that the district is obligated to pay. The rest of it is kind of to be determined. I'm believing that our other payroll costs as a percentage of payroll, like FICA, Social Security, paid leave Oregon, all of those things aren't going to change. They might, but I'm assuming they're not going to. So when you add those together, for every it's over 40 cents for every dollar we spend in wages is payroll cost. Yeah.
So on the PERS rate, it sounds like based on prior experience with the cap of 3% on the PERS increases from time to time, that you probably budgeted that it might be 26, about 26%. Instead, it's the 29.65.
Yeah. And I haven't calculated any increases into our proposal. So that's going to be a new row in here so that you can see the size then. Good question. This is for reference only, a review of where we landed after very many months for compensation and insurance. So we landed at 3% per year with some benefits to the folks on the top step. So a new top steps for all positions in year 1, and then longevity stipend in years 2 and 3. We also had some very targeted increases that span the 3-year period because of the wage study that we did in partnership. And then we added the bilingual stipend as well. And for insurance, you can see it yourself, $50 a month. And this is, you guys probably have your own way of tracking this, but from our schedules that we have, the distribution of people on their steps. So from step 1 would be a first-year person, step 9 would be someone who's on the very top, like 9 years or more, and maybe they started with some experience. But this graphic looks a little bit different because last bargain, I think we had more people on the top step. And this year, they're definitely more distributed across the schedule. Bullet points. I just want to be sure we talk about the bullet points at the top. So 80% of staff would have received that step movement coming from last year into this year. They would have already seen some type of impact to their check. The rest, 20% are on the top step and they'll get the GSI only unless something else is negotiated. And this is just another illustration. When you guys are looking at the schedules, I provide lots of sample schedules for you to dig into. This is kind of how they work. We have our base GSI. It's applied step 1. And then steps 2 through 8 is the prior step plus 3%. The final step has a 4% increase from 8 to 9. And we can look at different things, but this is how we've done it in the past. All right, so this was the district proposal from May. Again, just for review, 333. Pretty much starting where we ended last year. We started with our licensed partners. And so this is the same slide. I think I shared with you at the time we made the proposal with the addition of the new PERS costs. So you can see with the cost of the general salary increase, let's say in year 2, right in the middle, of almost $2.3 million in cost. That does include payroll costs. There's an additional cost for the PERS of almost $3.9 million. That's just in PERS alone. And again, folks won't feel that impact immediately, but it is of impact to the budget. So that's why I'm bringing it here today. And we'll continue to bring it. So you can see our first, our upper
is 22, just right at $22 million. And these are links to PDF wage schedules, so folks can like look right where they think they're gonna be in the schedules, and if that helps make determinations. This is the HCU counter that we received on the 10th. So you can see I count the step advancement and the general salary increase. And so cumulative for the 3-year period for folks that receive both, that's 28.5% increase. And then the insurance is the same. And here's the cost associated with that. Again, you can see the estimated cost for the general salary increase. Adding the first cost into that for year 1 is $6.1 million. Year 2 and is just over $10 million. And year 3 is just under 11. With a 3-year price tag of $27 million, giving us a gap of just over $5 million between our proposals. This is just another way of looking at the packages together. And these are our next steps. So today, very special day, we're bargaining. And there's a board work and regular session. And then we're bargaining again on the 5th, then a board work session. There's only 2 board meetings after this for the remainder of the year, one in November and one in December. And it kind of gives at the bottom kind of implementation requirements, what we need. First is a ratification by HCU and then a board vote. And then for our actual processing of the changes, we would need for the 5th for regular pay and by the 1st for retro pay. Retro pay can be very complicated, so it takes just a little bit more time. I am anticipating lots of questions. And if it's something that the team needs to kind of get all together after discussion and we want to send, that's great. I can share them back out in a bargaining session if you like.
Certainly, please send your presentation to us so we can talk about it in our caucus room. I think we will probably generate some questions after that discussion. Is anyone listening to questions now? Far fewer questions than you're anticipating.
I'm wondering, maybe my question is quite clear just yet, because it's hold all non-student contact hire. Redistribute, reassign job duties. Kind of, sort of, what would that look like? What's kind of the plan? What?
I have a perfect example in my very own office. A little bit damaging, so if I tear up, I had a staff member who actually took the position in another department just as this information was becoming available. And I was not able to refill that position as my contracts and agreements person. So that work has basically come back to me and to our risk manager to find a way to make those things still happen. I know that HR has had an impact already and the office.
So those changes would also be in our schools. Or
No.
mainly in AC, just in the.
Basically, it may be staff positions that are centrally based and dispatched to schools. Those we may hold on, but for the most part, we're really trying to protect the student experience and the positions that are closest to them.
Another example is like, we have a seat for care. Fleet auto service reverse faults, we're holding on. Thank you.
I have a question.
The 22 million that you had at the bottom of the initial proposal that you gave us, that now added in the 6.5. Are you balanced in budget to even offer that? The 22 million over what you would be balanced?
That is such a great question. We are, because that's just for the first year.
The first year we didn't have that, but then the other 2 years have added.
Right. So I guess what I can share with you today is that when we bring another proposal back to you guys, it may be structured differently in order to bring some of those original costs to the second year.
Did you said you didn't budget in even the 3% for those other 2 years in the original proposal, is that correct?
Not the PERS increase.
I have a question about the first increase in that. The 0 for this year, is the other two amounts, is that like over what you had assumed it to be? That's just the difference.
Yes. Yeah, and that's due to the biennial increase. First, they calculate the biennial rates based on, it's almost 2 biennia before. So they really use information from 21-23 biennium to inform the rates for 25-27. When we think about that time period, we did receive a bunch of additional resources in our system. So their assumption for what payroll growth would be for that time period is 3.4% per year, and it was much higher than that. So from their perspective, they're saying that that makes it much greater unfunded liability in the future. Also, the market earnings were dismal for that 2-year period, which the assumed rate of return for the PERS investments is 6.2% per year, and they were below that with both years. So the only other lever in their system to become funded is employer contributions.
I have a question. So at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that there was a negative state fund adjustment in May. School year. What was can you provide the number for the negative adjustment?
Yeah, it was $4.2 million.
4.2. And for those other budget, there was, I think, like 5 different things that you had on that slide that you said that there were negative amounts, like deficit.
They had gone over budget. Yes.
Yeah. Can you provide exact amounts for all of them?
Okay.
We'd love to see them.
Yep, I will do that. There's not a through line from what happened in 23-24 to 24-25, because there were areas in the budget where we did save some dollars. So just know that the math isn't going to be a straight equation for the gap that's in 24. But I will put it.
Yeah, it's a student enrollment, Dan. Looking forward, is there any projected increase, or are we still working on the?
Well, I'm thankful there's no wood for me to knock on here, because we have a report we're giving tonight to the board that does show a slight increase in student enrollment. And I think for the last several years, we planned on flat. Like, we planned on students coming back after the pandemic. That's what our funding was based on. And they continued to decline since 2008. So again, we released that information to the board tonight. But we are seeing it kind of flatten out. So very hopeful that we will eventually kind of grow because of all of the development in Hillsborough. I do have a demographer's report from last year that I can share with you guys for folks that really want to geek out over the enrollment and what their projections are for us in Hillsborough. We've done them since 2015. And at that time, we were projected, we're on a growth trajectory, very much. We were growing 18, 19, 20 and a half. And then just as we passed our bond, right before the pandemic, it started to decline. So that's kind of a national issue, maybe a global issue around birth rates being down.
and other school choice. And that you brought that up a lot. Like, what's your strategy for getting students in?
Right, because, you know, it was prior years and we prior to pandemic. Or development of staff. Participation. And
I can tell you the yield rates in terms of students at all levels are much lower from those homes than where. So I don't know if that, a lot of it has to do with price, style, of the homes over there. So,
I can also share with you just from, you know, because we look at the numbers of students coming in and, you know, we busing. And another place that we saw a dramatic change from what was anticipated was in several of the new developments. We anticipated a lot. And they just, they're not there.
Another question also, and I know you've mentioned before, students need money. So do these projected numbers also include our pre-K students? And I know we support a lot of like preschools that we have in our schools, and I've seen some groups on that. Does that help benefit the district in any way, or are these just numbers based on K through 12?
these are numbers based on K through 12. I would say that our preschools definitely benefit us in terms of the students being ready for school when they come to school. So there's that. But I don't know that that means there's more students coming into our system. We haven't really seen that yet. But we do get them sooner and we get to serve them sooner and get them ready.
In one of the earlier presentations on the deficit, the reasons for the budget deficit, you had mentioned liability insurance, but I didn't see that included in this presentation.
I just don't think I got to that same level of detail, really focusing on the bigger areas where we were off. And like I shared with here and there, it's not gonna be a straight across equation. Okay, because there's lots of other things that are changing between the fiscal years. So that's really what happened in 23-24. We have to make some adjustments for that in 24-25, knowing that that's our most recent experience.
Okay.
when are we able to request the next bond?
2026 will be likely, based on conversations with the board. Oh my gosh, this is reported. Based on what the conversations the board has had, and our current debt service for bonds, our first opportunity would be in November of 2026, with the second opportunity in May of 27.
Do you see any possible relief in what's happening with the state and governor's proposals? And not that you can bank. Is there any possible relief actually, depending on how all of that plays out?
Yeah, there is a slide in here for outlook that is missing.
Oh.
And that does kind of talk about advocacy and the work that's happened to date, really early with the governor's office, bringing our current service level from 10.2 billion up to 11.3. And according to our projections, that would have been current service level for Hillsborough, right up until the new PERS rates came out. And so we're hoping with some additional advocacy, the governor will go back to the drawing board with folks and look at those PERS rates and the impact of that.
Those in.
Yeah, yeah, but just note, that is a huge increase. We're gonna be asking for like a 13% increase in the state school fund for K-12. And there's a lot of competing interest. So I know that our communications department has some amazing materials that we're putting together. Hope to partner with everyone in that. I know our superintendents reached out to make sure that we can be in step together.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You guys want to just caucus and then.
I think that's right. We have some work to do, certainly. Want to plan to come back at 1:30. We might be able to come back a little earlier than that. We can be in touch.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I am sending Article 23. All right, it looks like that one made it around. So starting with A, I will say, Brian, when you're right, you're right. You were right. So I think, we've accepted in A, your language here.
Okay.
In 4 as well, programs of assistance for improvement, we're in agreement. The only change here in this article is C. We've removed the link to the union website. And we have here, the union office phone number and union email address, and the email address is right there, help@hcu671.org.
Okay.
So we just specified the specific email. If you we don't think we're going to be changing that anytime. The union website, we've done a lot of work on our website and it looks great, but in this situation, we don't necessarily want our members going to the website and seeing pictures of happy people in blue shirts when they're in a disciplinary manner. Just get the correct email and the phone number and be in touch with us.
Got it. We're good with that. So you have a clean copy of that.
Yes.
Yay!
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 Oh, she's right.
You're ready.
Feedback from that. What? Do it again. She's ready for something.
Let's see what
A little bit.
let's see what I can
Maybe just a little bit.
I think it's good. Yes, I do. And I can. We'll go. I'll start. So Article 14, vacation is making its way around. There are a couple of seconds. We're certainly making progress on this one. We're getting closer together. Really appreciate the collaborative work on vacation. So we did a couple of things with the grid, so we're gonna start there. One is, we've changed the labeling on the grid, so we think it's a little bit more clear. To years of employment instead of, years of service, so and then put the word year before the numbers instead of after, so you know that if you're in year 1, year 2, or year 3, that's that first grid.
Sure.
And then what we've done is shift the years in the left side just a little bit. Instead of 7 to 10 and then 11 to 13, we've shifted them down. This ensures that every one of our members gets an increase. No one stays exactly where they're at compared to the status quo. We wanted, if we're gonna have a gain here, all of our members should get some gain. We don't want some folks left without a gain. And we simply think that waiting 20 years is just too long to hit that top level of 22 days. So we're advancing this just a little bit more compared to what you had brought us.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
No, I think it is becoming clearer. The year 1 to 3 and all that stuff, that part I think is certainly helpful.
Great. In B, I believe we're in agreement. C, with no change except a strike that we're in agreement on. D, we're in agreement on moving to 3 months. Thank you for that. In E, we're in agreement on that small change that we've been making throughout the contract. Do you want to talk about that? Can you go through it? We're in agreement on F. Your language here encapsulated our intentions very well, so thank you there again. And in G, I think we're in complete agreement on this language as well. The only change that then we've made is in H. We've just put a parenthetical here where eligible employees means per D above, just to make it clear for our members when they read the contract what that eligibility means. We heard you from the last session and wanted something in there so they're not looking somewhere else in the contract to figure out if there's some eligibility that they don't know.
Makes sense. Great, thank you. I agree. We're getting closer and closer on this article, so thanks for that.
All of us.
Okay. We have responsible for you. Article 16. Margaret can queue up her music. We're good on Article 16. Well, I just need 10 copies of that one.
Yeah,
Oh.
With no writing on
I
it.
do not have.
You ready?
Oh, got mine.
We got one.
Problem solved.
Did you do that?
Yeah, so something else.
Yeah, interesting.
Exactly.
All right, we have a counter proposal for you on leaves. All right. Looks like it finally made its way around there. So again, we do have some movement here. This article, there's a lot of moving parts in this article, and I've said it before, we're trying to find that balance of, giving people the time they need to take care of things, knowing that absences and whatnot do impact us as an organization. So where do we find that balance? So we're continuing to kind of go in search of that, and there's a lot of different categories here, so bear with me. There is nothing on page 1 to discuss anymore. Page 2, personal leave, we have made movement here. And what you see there is the 2 days per year of personal leave. Then we've added employees who are not eligible for vacation shall also be permitted to convert 1 day of unused sick leave. So we see a difference between our employees who have, 10 to however many days of vacation, obviously, in more ability to take care of things or to be absent. That's also distinguishes a little bit from our licensed colleagues in that contract who have the 3 days. So we see a rationale to have some differentiation there. So that's the change there.
And for school year. Am I looking at the same?
Oh, yeah, for school year, sorry, just as a clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks. We talked about B1 and went and got some input. And I don't know if there's maybe a disconnect in understanding how it works right now. I mean, I think our interest is having those be pre-approved by human resources. And one of the reasons is we would like some level of consistency between work sites. I mean, on the one hand, making an individualized determination makes sense because the situations might be different. But we really want to find organizational consistency because it's hard for us when it's like, but this supervisor always approves them. This supervisor never approves them. So if we get those extremes, it gets hard to manage. So I think HR wants to be able to help find that consistency. Martha, does that sum up pretty well? Yeah. Okay. So we've left that language in. We had agreement already on B3. Nothing else on that page. Hearing you and hearing the legitimate interest on bereavement leave, we, I think, still believe that the parenthetical allows for the situations that we've been talking about where people have needed some allowance outside of the 90 days. So we've proposed to maintain that current language. We had already agreed to the 5 days for pregnancy loss, so that's carried forward. Down into emergency leave, emergency leave is one of those categories where we are feeling some danger of an expansion beyond what we're wanting in emergency leave, quite honestly. For us, it's a leave that's really should only be used if in exactly as the name applies, emergency situation. So as we read over F1, right now we're talking about 3 total days per work year. We've kept that. I see the rationale behind the proposed change to occurrence, but I think taken to the extreme, somebody could be getting numerous days of emergency leave within a year if it was a per occurrence. So we're worried about that expansion. So we've left it at for work year, change to immediate there in F1, consistent with what we've been doing elsewhere. We already had agreement on F2 and 3 and 4, 5. On this next one, we have agreed to the spouse or partner. We feel like, again, this is a leave category, specifically in this section where there's benefits under paid leave Oregon, there's benefits under a number of other sick time, Oregon sick time law. And so I believe that this was probably bargained at a time before those other leaves existed. We've kept dependent child living in the employee's home. We mean child living in the employee's home to attach only to the dependent part. So for us, spouse, it'd be different categories. In case of a child born to a spouse, a partner, or a dependent child living in your home would trigger that. So the spouse or partner would not have that qualifier associated with it. But again, really not looking to expand this leave category. Your number 7 that you proposed is tied to Article 19. I think we're not ready with the counter proposal on Article 19 yet, so we're looking to address all of our Article 19 issues in kind of one basket. So we've not included it here. We had both proposed to delete that next one down, and no change in what would become number 8. Section G, parental leave. We had agreement on the introductory paragraph in G1. We've agreed with your G1A to expand the availability of this leave. You no longer would need to work for the district for a year. You would only need to complete your initial hire period with the district. We also agree with you that that current G1B seemed like it was tied to licensed, our licensed work employees more than your bargaining unit. So we would agree to the strikeout there. Disability leave, there was a pronoun change and that was it. Long-term leave without pay, we had agreed on the only changes there in L1 and then the new L2. Short-term leave without pay requests. We've agreed with, or maybe we previously had agreement that will be processed through the employee absence reporting system, reviewed by the immediate supervisor and human resources director. Looks like that had already been in an agreement. We have agreed to eliminate the may include and instead use based on, but we have left in whether the employee has regularly scheduled breaks. And I'll give you an example. If somebody's requesting a short-term unpaid leave and it's to take care of something that's not time dependent, that is could be done at multiple times. And a week from now, like we've got winter break or summer break, I think that would be a factor that HR might use in determining whether or not. And again, here we're talking about somebody is out of all of their other leaves. I mean, they don't have personal leave, emergency leave doesn't apply. They don't have paid leave Oregon. They don't have OPLA, FEMLA. So we expect the use of short-term leave without pay to be very rare. It's not something that we see as being a common leave. So we agree that saying may include and then listing those things leaves open to interpretation. Well, what might also be included. So we've agreed to kind of make this an exhaustive list, but we would like all of the factors to be left on that exhaustive list. Agree with submitted in the absence reporting system. At least 1 week prior, if denied, the reason for denial shall be provided to the employee in writing. So that looks like it's, and we've agreed to the deletion of that last sentence so that people would not, they'd have that option of using unpaid leave or vacation. Section K, there was only one change that we've now forgot to make twice, which is making the word employee plural.
Done.
Yeah. Make sure I don't forget that again. L1, we had agreement there. L2, no changes. L3, we had agreement there. Or L2D, I guess that is. L3, no changes. So you had it A and B, which it looks like we picked up. Obviously, the formatting gets a little wonky. We need to fix all of that. We've added, if you go, it's at number 4, it's at the very bottom of the page. The union will solicit and track hours of sick leave. So we've agreed on the next page to allow for the donation of up to 5 sick leave days. I appreciate, we said somewhere between 1 and 99. Thank you for not bringing back like 98 or something like that. So, so we've agreed to that 5 days. I mean, and then there's also that component of it where if we believe that may increase the scenario where more leave gets donated than used. So we're now returning leave to people. We want you guys to be responsible for who gets it back and keeping track of that stuff. The HCU largely monitors or utilizes this sick leave donations. The district really only comes into play in that one spot where payroll will process the donated leave after the district has received notice from the union. So every once in a while, I think Martha was saying, we do get questions like, why wasn't my leave returned and somebody else's was returned? Or I think we would like you guys to field those questions.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
What does that look like for us?
I don't know that it's different from what you do now.
So I guess I'm not understanding. Will we be notified by the district which hours are being turned? We don't have that information currently.
So I did go visit with payroll.
Okay.
And license does have a very similar agreement with the district, and they track it in a spreadsheet, and payroll really only responds to the information that's provided to them by the union after the information has been from the employees, including the authorization that says they have a whole process set up that works well for me. So what I would say is given the language that we're thinking it would work in much the same way. So the burden of tracking, gathering, tracking, and distribution of hours would be.
So we would put the call out, then we would have those donated to us. They wouldn't go to payroll like they were. We then decide off that list, and then we notify payroll, please take this many hours from this person, and this person.
And give it to this person.
And
And
then
that's their only function.
how do we return the hours back?
If that-
You'll have a record of people donating because they do that through you guys, right?
So you're proposing we create a pool.
That's what the language says, but this is the union's.
But not.
Just
So-
a chart. HEA has a pool.
Yeah, HEA has a pool that they track out. That's why they track it that way, because they have a pool, but we just donate a day at a time and then have the day returned if it's not used.
But we don't return the day. Payroll returns.
Payroll.
the day.
But don't you tell payroll who to return the days to?
No,
No.
we send to payroll, hey, I'd like to donate, and payroll either says, great, we took it, or they say nothing to us. If they don't need the day, they just say, hey, we didn't need your hours, so they're coming back. to you.
Each member.
Each member contacts payroll directly.
Not HCU.
Yeah.
The only contact I have with payroll is to say employee ABC needs 30 hours. And then they keep track. I put an email out to the body and they get a hold of payroll directly with their donations. And then payroll takes those, whatever's left over, payroll returns.
Our process is pretty different from HEA's process in terms of the donation.
So you guys don't, the person that's donating goes directly to payroll? and
Correct,
you?
not through us. Only the person asking for donations, we approve and set how many hours that they need, and then we communicate that to the body through an email, and the whole other part of that process goes directly from the members donating to payroll.
I can make it specific if you want. That is, we fill out the paperwork, we submit it through our office manager who gives it to payroll. Payroll processes it. If it's completely used, it's end of story. If they only use 5 out of my 8 hours that I've donated, then I get an email from payroll that's saying only 5 hours were needed. We're putting 3 hours back on the books for you. So yeah, HCU isn't in the loop except for facilitating the communication.
Would you like to be?
Is the pool model something you would put it into? There would be like a beginning of the
Just
year and then.
To be honest, we talked about it as an organization and we felt like we didn't have the bandwidth at this point. Because there's pieces like, I don't know how to return things to, like, I mean, there'd be a learning curve, obviously, but we're not really interested in just keeping people's donations, like we want that to return to
Yeah.
them,
And
right?
currently, if I were to try to donate and I have less than 10 days, we wouldn't know if you have less than 10 days. So it goes through payroll because we can't see the vacation.
Sure.
So-
Right, there's a lot of pieces we're not privy to.
And then we hear from our members, I couldn't donate on this one because I've already done it.
What is the current number? The very bottom of the page, the union will solicit hours of sick leave from bargaining unit members and obtain the necessary paperwork from donors. What does that mean to you? But what do you think that calls on you guys to?
That's what she just said. We solicit hours of sick leave by saying, hey, we need this.
Right.
On an email.
Right.
And then the unit members get the paperwork.
What is the necessary? We don't.
And obtain the necessary paperwork from donors.
Email, there's no paper email or it's not.
I don't know if that was a past practice that
It was paid. It was
See, that-
paper, maybe
What
that's
to
why.
me said that if I want to donate, I send something to you guys that says I want to donate blank number of hours. But you're telling me the way it's worked in practice is they contact payroll directly and say, I want
Yes,
to
I
donate blank.
attach the form,
Yeah,
they fill it out and that form does not come back to me. It goes to
Yeah.
payroll directly,
well, I think no matter what we do, we should clean this up because,
yes.
I-
Because HCU is not obtaining any.
yeah, I wasn't.
Since this
reading
language
with
was
it.
put into the contract, obviously the systems have just slowly changed over
Yeah.
time, probably worth updating.
Okay, well, let me keep going. It sounds like this is,
Yeah.
gonna be a work. in
This is a
progress.
piece we can work together on
Okay.
for sure.
M. Again, we've agreed to, I don't know why just in format, it looks different. You guys had bolded and or we have bolded and underlined some things that maybe were in current language, but we've agreed to donate up to 5 sick leave days. We had already agreed to can't run your balance below 10. That was just a move from below. Number 3, we had agreement on. 4, no change. 5, we had agreement on. 6 was the piece that got moved. The next piece down, we were leaving certain things. And the next one, I think the piece that is new that we picked up was that strikeout because the reference to 1 day of their current contracted hours would not be relevant because it's now 5 days. Section N, we were in agreement on. Section O, we've agreed with your proposed change.
I had a question going back to, section J, the short-term leave without pay request.
Yeah.
The example you used was something that was not time dependent. So would that also mean that if something was, let's say, I have a child that's getting married in a different time zone, I can't really change the date of that, so.
Sure.
The fact that it's 2 weeks before Christmas break isn't really gonna help me.
Agreed.
Okay,
I don't read that list as being in every situation, all of those factors will be applied or be disqualifying factors. We're trying to list out, if I'm HR and I'm getting a request for unpaid leave, so I know it's not a statutory leave or another leave category, what am I gonna factor in, to consider whether to grant that, knowing I'm gonna be pretty judicious in my granting of that leave because, I've got now somebody asking for unpaid leave. They've exhausted all of their other potential leave, right?
Or it doesn't.
Or it doesn't fit into a category for another leave. So it's just, I think these are just the factors that will be looked at, but in any given situation, they may be less, more, or not important.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay,
On emergency leave, how often is emergency leave being used?
hold on a second. Let me get back to that. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. We probably would have to gather some data on how often. Michelle might have.
Well, in the meantime, while she's looking it up, my other question is on B. You mentioned that you still want it to be pre-approved by human resources. What's the avenue for that getting pre-approved by human resources? For personally.
Oh, for personally, sorry.
Well, for both, I mean, I think I have that question for both E and J. Is that current practice or is that a wish for future practice?
It's for practice.
Okay. So can you explain how that?
You, people put in the system what they want. If it's leave, vacation, or whatever they want. And then we take into consideration, the input of the supervisor. And it depends in the way right now that it is, it gives us a whole district-wide what is happening versus, you know, a supervisor over here is always approved by the supervisor over here. It's not. So we have a consistency, so it's based on.
But the supervisor gives input.
They give it.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why we're dealing with HR with opposed to the supervisor. Like right now I go to my supervisor, but then it goes to HR. So I'm confused with adding the middleman of HR. If you're just gonna go talk to the supervisor. And if your supervisor doesn't have consistency with other supervisors, why aren't your supervisors being talked to about being consistent? Instead of having employees go the extra step. And go
You're not
to
going to
HR.
the extra step. You're.
Well, right now, like I put in vacation 2 weeks ago, it's still not approved. But should that have gone to you? I mean, it goes right through my front line.
It goes to the front line and then it goes to the supervisor, either approves it or denies it. At that point, it's two approval steps. And once they do that first step, then it comes to.
Okay, I'm just confused with this, adding, like I said, HR. I mean, if it goes to my supervisor directly.
So just so I understand, and I hope I didn't cut you off, but I want to get some clarity. So people put it into the frontline system, which goes to basically concurrently their immediate supervisor and HR. Their supervisors allowed to then make comments as a back end process you have with your managers to ensure that some supervisors are improving all of them while some are doing none of them. And that is essentially why you want this language, all personal leave requests must be pre-approved by human resources.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's the same for what were the other section, where emergency leave, for example. I mean, it is an effort to achieve some organizational consistency. And the district does work with its supervisors but we also hear from employees a perception that some supervisors are more lenient in granting things than other supervisors. I mean, that happens in a big organization, right? And so it's part of the effort, training supervisors up front, but then also having kind of a check and balance. Also, it's part of the effort to make sure that we've got kind of an overall sense of fairness or consistency, especially on something like attendance, because having wildly different practices in one part of the district is not a healthy thing. I mean, employees really then start feeling like there's favoritism or the supervisor just will never approve things, So I think we are just trying to.
So in that scenario or that situation, if a supervisor did not want to approve it, HR could say, we do approve it. Is that sort of what you're saying, that if they trying to, what would happen as well?
Would you say like, hey, why aren't you approving?
Yeah.
This, you have a
I'll let
conversation.
him up and say, hey,
So a lot of that sounds super reasonable. I think when we read the contract, we're trying to read it from the point of view of our member, right? Our member reading that they have to get this kind of request approved, pre-approved by human resources felt like very different than actually what the practice is. The reason I'm bringing that up is because there might be some other language that still protects the process you have on the back end. I think you could do probably without this language being in the contract. But also make it clear to our members that they're just supposed to submit these through Frontline.
I have had people come up to me and ask, but how do I get stuff approved? Do I have to email human resources? Do I email supervisor? And it's also been particularly confusing since we started Frontline this year because the old process used to be different. We had paper forms. So I think there is a lot of confusion out there among the employees as to how do I request this stuff and where do I put my reason? Is it in notes in Frontline or do I send a separate email? I think it's very confusing for people.
I think especially in transportation, since that shift is coming, that's what's happened, but the rest of the district, most of them is just.
So if I don't like the response I get from my supervisor, then do I go to HR to try and get the response changed?
You can contact insurance.
But it automatically goes to HR anyway.
Once the supervisor does their part, yes.
So whether they approve or not, it goes to HR.
But if they let it sit there, then TJ's vacation may just be sitting in the supervisor's box right now and nobody's.
I mean, it's been approved now, but still, I've got, you know, there's been times where it's been
Last
unapproved.
minute.
You started recording this.
I know, there are a lot.
Like what we've agreed on short-term leave without pay is that the request will be processed through the employee absence reporting system and reviewed by the immediate supervisor and human resource director. You can just mirror that in the other places.
I see. Yeah, yeah, that's helpful. This is a good conversation. Just, I don't know that we're unaligned other than that, we do have an interest in making sure the contract reads in such a way that our members know how they're part of administrating it, is easy enough for them to figure out.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at what we've mutually agreed on how it's gonna work under short-term leave without pay. So see if that feels like it works for you in the other portion.
Okay.
Just have one other question that.
Yeah.
What you just were talking about might address it, but in D1, personal leave, I think that we have struck all personal leave requests must be pre-approved by human resources.
Yeah.
Not only because of process, but also because the first sentence in one says one thing, when circumstances permit, we can request at least 2 working days in advance and approve 1 workday in advance. And then the second sentence seems to contradict the first sentence. All personal leave requests must be pre-approved by human resources when the first sentence allows when circumstances permit, and that just at a plain read, it's confusing, it's unclear what's going on.
Yeah.
And maybe what we're talking about with the short-term leave request wording.
Yeah.
Might address it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there because it does feel like it conflicts within that same paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think maybe if we incorporate that language.
So
That
that
language
language,
we're pointing out.
Yeah.
in
that might,
J.
that's helpful to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, the language you're pointing out in J, Brand, I do think it's. We've agreed on it. It might give us clarity there. We'll consider that.
Okay. Jessica, did you have another question? I can't remember if you had 2 and then with this one just kind of spawned.
No, mine is actually going back to the bereavement leave.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying about the extenuating circumstances kind of being a catch for people who, you know, need more than the 90 days. So for hypothetical, so my grandmother passes away in January, and I take 1 or 2 days of bereavement right after that. But my family isn't holding a memorial service until May. Or June. And it's something that you need to travel. Is that something that would be approved? Is there a situation?
I mean, to me, those feel like extenuating circumstances.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
If that would count, would there be
a situation where that might be denied, a request.
I mean, I don't know, Martha, those requests go to you. I mean, I think it would only be one of those, every once in a while, we do get somebody who has a pattern of leave usage that is kind of questionable, or this is kind of a repeating, pattern of things, and it's, you start to feel like, is this need legitimate, or is somebody working the system a little bit? It's not a large percentage of the workforce, but the very small percentage it is frustrating to try and deal with. So I could see there being a situation where where it feels like this is in line with a pattern of behavior that's feels a little bit questionable. Those would be the ones that would.
It's an interesting discussion because I certainly think that with our proposal moving the 90 days out, we're reading the additional 5 days as additional. So sometimes you lose someone who's so close to you that 5 days isn't enough, and you can make an additional request for another 5 days. Many times that's going to happen right away, right, within 90 days. But the situation Jessica's talking about is different. You don't necessarily want an additional 5 days. You just kind of want to read, but a little bit later, it's scheduled out. Another thing that happens is folks will pass in areas that are frozen during the winter, and they might wait until the ground thaws enough to actually have a burial. So there's a number of things that do happen that go out past that 90 days. I'm wondering if there's a path, a language path that isn't expansive, because I hear what you're saying about, sometimes you don't want people who are kind of like gaming it. But also I think we do have enough situations where folks want to take some of this time past the 90 days. Might there be a good language path we should consider taking if we're talking about this?
Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I mean, obviously we'll entertain counter proposals, and I think you hear some of our concerns. I think another part of our thinking is that we're also expanding personal leave and the ability to use personal leave. So, I think we're again looking at this as a total kind of basket of leaves, and where one might not cover, another might step in and cover. And so now you've got more personal leave than you used to have. So if you had a need come up later and it didn't get covered by bereavement, maybe now you can use personal. So I mean, we're looking at how these leaves all kind of interplay with each other.
That makes sense.
But, we're trying to, like I said at the beginning, we're trying to find that balance of being sensitive to people's needs and sensitive to the operations of the district. And so certainly, if you have a different take or a different idea on it, we would glad to take a look at it.
Is the problem of the 90 days the initial 5 days, or is it on the extra 5 days? So like, if people are asking for 10 days off, is it like, well, we can see that you need 10 days off if you have to go take care of your parents' household that they had died from?
I don't think it's the additional 5 days, because as I read that, it's available as provided for in Oregon law, which I believe the 90-day requirement is in that statute. I think I have to go back because they redid OFLA and PLO, so I would need to check on that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Michelle, were you able to find anything in the emergency?
I was wondering if anybody still care about it.
Nice question.
23-24 has 89 members access emergency leave for varied amounts with a total of 896.5 hours granted.
That was 22-23, but
23-24.
What was the total hours?
What's 896? 896.5.
Thank you.
so I'm talking. Thank you, Michelle. Do you find that was in line with what would have happened in years past?
No, the last couple of years have been a little bit different. Last year was probably a good year. And this year would again be a good year, but I think
Thank you for that. Good conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Last, or any remaining questions on this one?
I have one.
Yeah.
Let's say this. Can you clarify to me what a dependent child living in employee's home?
like a teen mom, maybe. Or any, actually, dependent is anyone under 26 living at home who has a child.
Right, but what if, say, I have a daughter who lives in Washington with her mom? And she's pregnant, and I get her, to see her like once a month, she comes over to my house. What happens if she lives over, she's not technically living in my home? Do I still have the right to take that home?
Not under emergency. Yeah, I think that I don't know that the dependence is that important of a qualifier here. I think it was the child living in the employee's home.
And there's lots of split houses, that's what. I think about.
Our discussion, we thought dependent would be a better qualifier because it would put an age limit and a closeness of a relationship and a financial duty to that person rather than where they actually keep their toothbrush. I mean, that's kind of what our interest was in deleting the part about living in the employee's home, because there are many people who split time, or you may have a child that's in college full-time in another town that you really want to be there, and you can't really schedule leave in advance because it's like you don't know when that person's going into labor. So this is a very limited number of people that are gonna be, have this child that's a legal dependent under the age of 25, living in a split home or away at college, giving birth, and we don't qualify for other leaves because of that.
I'd have to see if he qualified under paid leave or. I mean, we see a lot of overlap with this one, which I think is one of the reasons why we're not viewing it as critical of a leave category, is because of the overlap there now is. That wasn't there when this was bargained in. There wasn't the ability to have paid leave for these things.
So you're saying this may be actually covered under paid leave Oregon, and that's why.
Yeah. We should confirm that, but. I mean, no doubt that a case of a child born to a spouse or partner is covered under paid leave Oregon. And so again, I think that's a big part of it. We talked about, is this now kind of a outdated leave category in and of itself? We didn't want to propose to delete it, but we feel like there's coverage elsewhere.
We had also talked about surrogates, and we weren't sure if that was covered under paid leave Oregon.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're having a child via a surrogate. And these are all things where, again, we don't want to prevent people from being present at those. And at the same time, it's not something we can really plan for.
Yeah. We'll circle back to this one. I mean, I think, ultimately, I don't know that we're always going to account for every possible scenario, right? I mean, they are infinite. I hope what you're taking from our proposals is a legitimate willingness to be expanding our leave options, because I think we have between personal leave and some of these other, and sick leave donation and things like that. So I think we are recognizing the need for folks to be able to take care of things. Again, we're just looking for some guardrails around it, so it it doesn't become totally burdensome.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
That's good timing. That's what we had at a caucus, 224.
Yes, we're there. Good work, everyone. Yeah, I think we were ready to adjourn to talk about the next section.
Okay.
Are you meeting on election day? That's actually happening.
Are we really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go for that.
The ballot box.
Wow, we are. Until 6 p.m. on election day.
Interesting.
Everyone take your anxiety meds. then.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
Think everything's happening.
Drop it off on the way in. Wow. I think we'll be ready to present on 4 probably next time we meet. I think that's all. Anything else?
We probably will by the fifth.
We might by the 5th.
We haven't talked about it yet, so we'll maybe try and have some back and forth before then, and let you know.
Might have to.
Great. I mean,
Wednesday.
my blood pressure just spiked looking at the calendar.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good.
Awesome.
Good TA.